Imagine stepping onto a battlefield, right? But your enemy, it's not human. Your enemy is the Earth itself, literally bleeding millions of tons of liquid fire, moving relentlessly toward everything you've ever built. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most extreme battlegrounds on the planet, Iceland. Because look, this isn't your standard disaster management. No, this is a literal all-out war of human engineering against the raw, absolutely terrifying power of nature. And today we're looking at the exact heavy metal tactics used to fight a volcano.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to truly understand what these engineers are actually up against, you have to look at this number. 1,200 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature of the lava pouring out of the Earth. At this level of extreme, mind-bending heat, normal defensive infrastructure doesn't just fail. It literally melts away. It's vaporized. And, it's not just the heat we have to worry about. We are dealing with millions of tons of unstoppable hydraulic pressure. If you try to build a wall directly in the path of a volcanic eruption to just stop it dead in its tracks, you will lose. Every single time. It is a physical impossibility. The sheer brute force of that magma will just bulldoze right through, or instantly incinerate whatever you put in front of it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it introduces our core intellectual hook for this whole operation, the geometry of diversion. Since you absolutely cannot punch a volcano in the face, you have to judo throw it. You don't block it, you redirect it. Engineers calculate these exact razor-sharp angles for their defensive barriers, completely shifting the whole architectural approach from trying to stop the flow to subtly, brilliantly guiding it.
So let's walk through the exact tactical steps of how this actually works on the ground. First, the engineering teams calculate the precise flow angle of the advancing magma. Second, and this is so cool, they utilize the fluid viscosity of the molten rock itself. By making sure the lava hits the barrier at a sharp, glancing angle, the sticky, highly viscous nature of the rock forces it to gently slide along the wall rather than slamming straight into it. And this allows the defenders to execute step 3, perfectly guiding that fiery river away from vital infrastructure, tricking it into bypassing towns, and funneling it safely into uninhabited valleys or, ideally, straight into the sea.
But listen, to execute this massive geographical judo throw, the scale of construction has to be staggeringly brutal. Around regions like Grindavik and Svartsengi in Iceland, engineering teams have rapidly constructed up to 14 kilometers of these continuous defensive barriers. Think about that for a second. 14 kilometers of man-made mountains rapidly built just to alter the actual geography of the Earth.
And this brilliantly illustrates a really counterintuitive point. You might think, hey, we'd use towering walls of reinforced steel and concrete to fight a volcano, right? Nope. Against 1,200-degree liquid rock, the immense thermal shock causes concrete to instantly shatter and fail catastrophically. Instead, the solution is beautifully primitive but highly calculated. Massive earthen dikes made entirely of crushed volcanic basalt rock and soil.
The dimensions required for this are absolutely brutal. We are talking about earthen walls towering up to 20 meters tall. That's like a 6-story building, and 40 meters wide at their base. Built meticulously, layer by compacted layer. This sheer, immense mass of crushed rock is designed for one specific purpose: to physically absorb that heavy, grinding, kinetic impact of the moving lava flow. But to build these towering mountains, you are in a continuous, desperate race against a lava river that is steadily advancing meters per hour. Speed is absolutely everything here. Iceland literally mobilized a heavy machinery fleet of massive excavators and 104-ton Caterpillar D11 bulldozers. Just imagine the intensity of operating these huge steel behemoths where you're constantly engulfed in toxic gas clouds, working under the extreme, blistering, radiant heat of an approaching wall of fire. It is wild. And it's not like they're just pushing soft dirt around. To build these barriers, these machines must continuously fracture old, solidified basalt rock right out of the landscape. And that old rock, it has a crushing strength of up to 300 megapascals. They are literally tearing the earth apart with steel, fracturing rock and furiously stacking it directly in the path of the advancing eruption just to stay one single step ahead of total destruction. So the crucial point is that even with perfect angles, a massive fleet of heavy machinery, and 20-meter-high earthen walls, you are still at the mercy of the Earth. Which brings us to the ultimate engineering nightmare, the fissure breach. This happens when the Earth simply decides to rip open from directly underneath your protected perimeter. The magma completely bypasses your massive defensive wall by welling up right from below. When that fissure opens inside your safe zone, you are faced with this terrifying, sinking realization. As the quote says, "The barrier turns from a shield into a cage." The very walls you sweat and bled to build to keep the lava out are now trapping the molten rock inside the exact zone it was meant to protect. It's a horrifying moment, and it forces a completely frantic, real-time recalculation of the entire defensive strategy. Let's move to and see how this builds into our next chapter, the 1973 precedent, the seawater weapon. Because sometimes, you guys, walls alone simply aren't enough. Going back to 1973, during the famous Eldfell eruption on the island of Heimaey, human engineering didn't just build walls. They literally weaponized the ocean itself. Looking at this timeline, you can see the sheer escalation. A vital fishing harbor was directly threatened by a massive 100-meter-wide active lava front. Within days, it became chillingly clear that the earthen walls were going to fail. The entire town was going to be erased. So in a desperate, brilliant tactical shift weeks later, engineers deployed high-pressure seawater pumps. And the volume they used is just staggering. 1,000 liters of seawater. Every single second, they blasted this massive, relentless torrent of freezing North Atlantic Ocean water directly onto the blazing 100-meter-wide face of that advancing lava front. It's a literal battle of fire and ice.
The result of that battle was this brilliant masterstroke known in geology as a chilled margin. The extreme volume of water caused an instant flash freezing of the lava's outer layer. It instantly turned that liquid fire into solid rock. And by doing this, they essentially forced the volcano to build its own high-strength concrete cage. They dammed the liquid magma behind its own hardened crust and successfully saved the harbor. Unbelievable, right? From the geometry of diversion to the brutal scale of earthen dikes, and finally, to the seawater weapon, we've seen the absolute extreme limits of how human engineering can fight the earth and win. But as we continue to build and defend, it leaves us with this final haunting question. We can calculate the angles, we can guide the lava, and we can freeze the fire. But what happens when the earth opens up from underneath? When the battlefield itself fractures beneath our feet? Where exactly do we build the next wall?